Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. I never imagined, even in my worst nightmares, that I would find myself in an ambulance, escorting my affair partner to the hospital after my husband nearly beat him to a pulp. My name is Sandra, and for the past 5 years, I have been married to Leo. We live in Detroit, Michigan. Until 2 weeks ago, I had never witnessed the violent side of my husband, and now, the mere thought of facing him fills me with dread. I don't know how to ask for his forgiveness when I can't even forgive myself. Our marriage didn't start this way. In the beginning, it was full of love, respect, and friendship. Leo and I had been best friends for years, weathering life's storms together. But as time passed, the cracks in our relationship deepened. We have 2 children, a boy and a girl, but neither of them lives with us anymore. Our relationship became so toxic that our families had to step in. Our parents decided it was best to keep the kids away from the chaos. Leo is furious that even his own parents won't allow him to see them, while I know I am in no emotional state to be with him right now. The rift in our marriage became undeniable after the birth of our second child 2 years ago. We argued constantly, mostly because of my insecurities about his job. As unreasonable as it sounds, I resented him leaving for work every day, surrounded by intelligent and attractive female colleagues. It made me feel inadequate. I had no college degree, no career to focus on, just the role of a housewife. A part of me longed for him to take time off, to stay home and help raise our children. I didn't expect him to quit his job entirely, just take a break long enough to ease my insecurities. But Leo insisted that providing for our family was his priority, and taking a leave was not an option. His father eventually stepped in to mediate, and for a while, things went back to normal. That peace, however, was short-lived. Then, temptation came knocking, and I failed the test of loyalty miserably. A year ago, I traveled to Alabama for my best friend's wedding. The journey from Detroit to Alabama takes nearly 14 hours by plane, practically an entire day of travel. Leo was not happy about me leaving our toddlers behind for a week-long trip. He insisted that if I was going, I should at least take our youngest with me. But I refused, believing he should take responsibility for a change. I had done it for years. He argued that work made it impossible for him to care for them alone, but I didn't care. Being a housewife was just as exhausting, and I needed a break. In the end, I left without telling him, abandoning my responsibilities for a taste of freedom. I know it made me a terrible mother, but at that moment, I just wanted to breathe. That trip became the ultimate test of my marriage. Being 14 hours away from home, in a different environment, surrounded by strangers, I let my conscience slip. And what followed was the beginning of my downfall. I've never claimed to be a saint, and I accepted that truth the moment I met Kevin. The night of the cocktail party, 3 days before the wedding, changed everything. Kevin was smooth, confident, and persistent. I tried to turn him down at first, but his charm was intoxicating. I knew being around him was dangerous, but I let myself fall anyway. Kevin was temptation in human form, his deep, lingering stares, the way he pushed boundaries with subtle touches. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Instead, I embraced it. I can't blame Kevin entirely because I was just as responsible. I welcomed his advances, hid my wedding ring, and deliberately omitted the fact that I was married. I went as far as changing my phone's home screen, erasing the picture of Leo and our kids. I wanted to feel single, to escape reality for just a little while. Some might call it disgraceful, and I wouldn't argue. Temptation is easier to surrender to when no one is watching. I lacked self-control, and worse, I didn't even try to fight it. Kevin was smart. He knew how to read me, how to play his cards just right. He saw the way I lit up around him and used it to his advantage. For me, it wasn't just about lust. It was about escaping the weight of my marriage, the arguments, the responsibilities, the feeling of never being enough. With Kevin, I felt wanted, desired. It was a stark contrast to my life back home, where Leo knew all my flaws and our children depended on me. If my kids had been there, maybe they would have reminded me of my duties as a wife and mother. But in Alabama, I was free to forget. No one knew me except my best friend, and with wedding preparations keeping her occupied, no one was watching my every move. Kevin whispered sweet words that made me giggle like a schoolgirl. By the end of the night, I had kissed him more times than I could count. When he invited me to his room, I didn't hesitate. That night, I lost the last shred of loyalty I had left. The next morning, I showered with him, had breakfast in his room, and spent the entire day by his side. I was so consumed by Kevin that I skipped the bridesmaids' brunch my best friend had planned. I didn't care. I was smitten. I dreaded the wedding's end because I knew it meant returning to reality, to Leo, to my children, to the guilt I had yet to face. But even that guilt wasn't enough to stop me. I spent the rest of the trip in Kevin's arms, moving into his hotel room just to be closer to him. For that week, I became a wife to a man I barely knew. On the last day, Kevin promised to visit me in Detroit. He lived in Alabama, but had family back home. While the idea of seeing him again was tempting, I knew it was dangerous. I couldn't let my affair cross into my real life. I did everything I could to keep my betrayal a secret. I made sure Kevin and Leo would never meet. But fate had other plans. And when they finally did, it ended in broken bones. Leo may not have known about my betrayal right away, but he wasn't blind. The moment I returned from Alabama, he watched me closely, sensing the shift in me. People with the most to hide often try the hardest to appear normal. That was my mistake. In trying too hard to pretend that nothing had changed, I gave Leo every reason to believe that something had. In fact, it was the first time I had ever cheated in any relationship. Even in my past ones that never led to marriage, I had always been loyal. So after betraying my vows, simply being in the same room as my husband felt suffocating. Leo isn't the kind of man who can be easily manipulated or softened. He carries himself with confidence and sharp intuition. From the start, he resented the way I left for Alabama without taking our daughter, as he had suggested. The fact that I slipped away before he even woke up made matters worse. He took it as a sign of disrespect. When I returned, the tension was unbearable. Leo didn't hide his frustration and immediately confronted me about how I had left. In response, I became defensive. Admitting that I had disrespected him, let alone in the worst possible way, was out of the question. But Leo wasn't convinced by my excuses. He insisted that my actions were suspicious, that sneaking away like that could only mean I had something to hide. Deep down, I knew he was right. But I also knew that I would rather chew a denim jacket than admit I had cheated, or even that I had gone to Alabama with the intent to do so. I decided to gaslight Leo and act completely nonchalant. Telling him the truth was never an option. I knew without a doubt that he would kick me out without even listening to an explanation. Leo would never forgive me if he found out I had cheated. He had zero tolerance for adultery and infidelity, something we had discussed even before getting married. There was no way I could talk my way out of it. No excuse that would make him look past my betrayal. So I chose to play it cool and hope that, with time, he would drop his suspicions. I gradually resumed my usual routine, falling back into the role of a housewife. Though the tension between Leo and me lingered, I did my best not to push things too far, hoping that time would smooth things over. After a few weeks, it seemed like we had finally returned to normal. The distance and unease between us faded, and I let myself believe that everything was behind me. I forgot all about Kevin and moved on with my life. But that peace was only the calm before the storm. Months after my time in Alabama, Kevin reached out to me again, with news that sent a jolt of panic through my entire body. He was in Detroit. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I never expected to see him again, and hearing his voice, knowing he was in the same city, filled me with a mix of emotions. But excitement wasn't one of them. There was nothing to look forward to, only dread. I knew Kevin was trouble, and if I wasn't careful, he could blow everything apart. And I was right. Not long after revealing he was in Detroit, he started asking to see me. He was relentless, wearing me down with his persistence until, eventually, I agreed to meet him. Deep down, I knew it was a terrible idea, but part of me wanted to see him again, despite everything. We met up for lunch, and from the moment he walked in, I knew I was in trouble. Throughout our meal, Kevin couldn't keep his hands off me. Unlike how calm I had been when Kevin acted this way in Alabama, I was absolutely terrified when he did it in Detroit. For crying out loud, we were in the same city as my husband. I had to be extremely careful. Every move I made carried a risk, but at the same time, I couldn't afford to act nervous. If I did, Kevin would start suspecting something. That lunch was, without a doubt, the most awkward meal I had ever experienced. The entire time, I kept my eyes darting around the restaurant, scanning the room to make sure no one I knew was watching. But Kevin, as impatient as ever, didn't seem to care that we were in public. After lunch, I had to rush home to prepare dinner for Leo and pick up the kids from school. It was a tight schedule, and even though I hurried, I still fell behind. When Leo got home, I wasn't even done with dinner. The moment he stepped inside, he asked me if I had gone out that day. His question caught me off guard. I hadn't told him I was going anywhere, so how did he know? His anger became even more apparent when he demanded to know why I had left the kids waiting at school for nearly an hour before picking them up. That was when I realized I had been caught. I had lost track of time because I stopped to buy groceries for dinner. I knew the school would eventually call one of us, but I had assumed they would try me first. When I didn't receive a call, I figured they hadn't contacted anyone at all. So when Leo confronted me, I was completely blindsided. Thinking quickly, I made up an excuse, blaming the grocery store for taking too long to process my payment. It was a weak cover, but it was just enough to make Leo drop the subject for the moment. My biggest mistake was underestimating him. I thought the matter had ended with that conversation, but I had no idea that Leo would keep digging until he uncovered the truth. And then, like the devil he was, Kevin invited me out again, this time for dinner. I tried my best to refuse. The risk of getting caught was too high, and I didn't want to push my luck. But Kevin, as persistent as always, refused to take no for an answer. Unlike during the day, sneaking out at night without being noticed would be nearly impossible. I had to be more careful than ever. It took me a long time to gather the courage to leave the house that night. I had to wait for the kids to fall asleep first, then for Leo to doze off. Fortunately, he usually went to bed early since he had to wake up early for work, so it wasn't too difficult to slip out unnoticed. As soon as he was asleep, I rushed out to meet Kevin. This time, he had booked a hotel for us. I made it clear that I couldn't stay the night, but he pleaded with me to stay longer. Whenever I was with Kevin, it was as if all my common sense disappeared. Rational thinking went out the window, and I found myself making the most reckless decisions. That night was no exception. I carelessly had dinner with him, flirted, and kissed him multiple times, right there in public. Ignoring my better judgment, I spent the night at the hotel with Kevin. But when I returned home the next morning, my heart nearly stopped at the sight before me. Scattered outside the house were my belongings, all dumped unceremoniously for the world to see. Panic surged through me. And then, Leo played a video. Clear footage of me kissing Kevin at the hotel restaurant the night before. I was speechless. No excuse. No explanation could possibly justify what I had done. My marriage was over, and karma had finally caught up with me. I had never been unfaithful in any relationship before. Even in my past romances that didn't lead to marriage, I had always been loyal. But after breaking my vows, simply being in the same room as my husband felt suffocating. Leo wasn't the kind of man who could be easily deceived or softened by words. He carried himself with confidence, sharp intuition, and a strong sense of respect. From the beginning, he had resented the way I left for Alabama without our daughter, just as he had suggested. Slipping away before he even woke up had only made matters worse. To him, it was a blatant sign of disrespect. When I returned, the tension between us was unbearable. Leo didn't hide his frustration and immediately confronted me about my actions. I became defensive. Admitting that I had wronged him, let alone in the worst way possible, was unthinkable. But Leo wasn't convinced by my excuses. He insisted that my behavior was suspicious, that sneaking away like that could only mean I had something to hide. Deep down, I knew he was right. But I also knew that confessing the truth was not an option. If I did, Leo would throw me out without hesitation. He had zero tolerance for infidelity, something we had made clear before marriage. No excuse could make him look past my betrayal. So I chose deception, hoping that over time, his suspicions would fade. I resumed my usual routine, playing the role of a devoted wife. Though tension still lingered, I avoided pushing boundaries, believing time would mend the rift. Eventually, things seemed to return to normal. The distance between us faded, and I allowed myself to believe that my secret was safe. But that peace was only an illusion. Months after my time in Alabama, Kevin reached out to me with a revelation that sent a jolt of panic through me. He was in Detroit. I never expected to hear from him again, and knowing he was in the same city filled me with a mix of emotions. But excitement wasn't one of them. I knew Kevin was trouble, and if I wasn't careful, he could ruin everything. I was right. He started pressuring me to meet him, relentless in his pursuit. Against my better judgment, I gave in. We met for lunch, and from the moment he walked in, I knew I was in trouble. Unlike in Alabama, where I had been more composed, I was now utterly terrified. For God's sake, my husband was in this city. Every move I made carried a risk, yet I had to mask my fear. Kevin, however, was reckless, unable to keep his hands off me. The meal was agonizing, my eyes darting across the restaurant, scanning for familiar faces. After lunch, I rushed home to pick up the kids and prepare dinner for Leo. But I had lost track of time. When Leo arrived home, dinner wasn't even ready. He immediately asked if I had gone out that day. His question caught me off guard. I hadn't told him I was leaving, so how did he know? Then, with a sharp edge to his voice, he demanded to know why the kids had been left waiting at school for nearly an hour before being picked up. That's when I realized I had been caught. Scrambling, I made up an excuse, blaming the grocery store for the delay. It was weak, but just enough to make Leo drop the subject, for now. I underestimated him. Thinking the matter was settled, I didn't realize that Leo would continue digging until he found the truth. And then, as if the devil himself had planned it, Kevin insisted on meeting again, this time for dinner. I tried to refuse. The risk was too high, but Kevin was persistent, refusing to take no for an answer. Unlike during the day, sneaking out at night was nearly impossible. I waited until the kids and Leo were asleep, then slipped out unnoticed. Kevin had booked a hotel for us. I told him I couldn't stay long, but he pleaded. And as always, when I was with Kevin, common sense deserted me. We flirted, we kissed, carelessly, in public, convinced no one I knew would see us. I ignored my instincts, stayed the night, and returned home at dawn, only to find my belongings thrown out onto the lawn. My clothes, my shoes, my personal items, all dumped outside for the world to see. My heart pounded violently in my chest. Stepping inside, I was met with an even greater shock. Leo's parents, my parents, all seated in the living room, waiting. Leo pulled out his phone and played a video, clear footage of me kissing Kevin at the hotel restaurant. I was speechless. No excuse, no explanation. And then, like a nightmare unfolding, our parents began discussing custody arrangements. Before I could even grasp the weight of what was happening, my mother grabbed me by the hair and dragged me out of the house. Even as they berated me, expressing their disappointment, I remained silent. I was in shock. Despite all my efforts to be careful, Leo had followed me, tracking my every move. The next day, I called Kevin and told him everything. The truth about my marriage. The fact that I had been thrown out. Kevin was furious at me. He was angry that I had hidden my marriage from him. Yet, in the same breath, he dismissed it, saying it didn't matter. After all, he had been in a relationship too. I asked him if I could stay with him in Alabama, but he refused. Instead, he insisted on confronting Leo. I knew it was a terrible idea, but I never imagined how disastrous it would be. When Kevin showed up at Leo's house, demanding answers, Leo's fury erupted. A fight broke out, fists flying, blood spilling. I watched in horror as Leo beat Kevin mercilessly. When I tried to intervene, Leo shoved me aside. Eventually, a bystander pulled them apart, but by then, Kevin was in terrible shape. I had to call an ambulance. Kevin blamed me. He made me pay his medical bills, then blocked my number, accusing me of setting him up. He even threatened legal action against both me and Leo unless I covered his hospital costs. And then he vanished. As for Leo, he wasted no time filing for divorce. He was ruthless. He gathered evidence, hired top-tier lawyers, and won full custody of our children. I wasn't just divorced, I was stripped of everything. My parents disowned me. My savings were gone. My visitation was limited to supervised meetings. I went from being their mother to a mere visitor. 7 months passed. Leo moved on. He had someone new now, a woman who laughed with my children, who looked like the perfect family with him. And I could do nothing but watch from the sidelines, drowning in regret, burdened by shame. This is my reality now. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.